It's 2 a.m., and I'm standing in what used to be somebody's kitchen, cataloging fire damage from faulty wiring. The smell of burnt plastic and dreams hangs in the air like a funeral shroud. My phone buzzes against my chest. A text from Eliza. Sorry, babe. Showing a client a downtown loft. Will be late. Love you. At midnight. Right. I'm Mike Harlan, fire inspector for the city. 23 years of marriage, 15 years on this job, and I thought I knew the difference between truth and bullshit. Turns out I was wrong about a lot of things. The signs had been there for months, subtle as smoke before the flames. Eliza's phone moved from the nightstand to her purse. Conversations that used to happen in our living room now required privacy on the balcony. She'd developed this new habit of closing doors behind her, speaking in hushed tones that carried just enough to let me know I wasn't welcome. It's just Julian, she'd explained when I finally asked. You remember Julian Mercer, my ex from college? He's going through a messy divorce. I'm just being supportive. Julian fucking Mercer. The tech consultant with the perfect teeth and the BMW who thought fire inspectors were basically janitors with badges. Yeah, I remembered him from the company Christmas parties back when Eliza worked at Morrison Real Estate. The way he'd look right through me when we shook hands, like I was some kind of service personnel. We parted normally. Eliza had assured me 3 months ago when the call started. We're both adults. We can communicate without drama. But adults don't hide their phones. Adults don't whisper on balconies at 11 p.m. And adults sure as hell don't delete their text history every single night. I finished my inspection report and headed home to our apartment on Riverside Drive. The building was one of those converted warehouses with exposed brick and industrial fixtures that made Eliza feel sophisticated, made me feel like I was living in a museum where everything cost too much and nothing was comfortable. The apartment was dark when I got home, but I could hear her voice drifting through the sliding door to the balcony. I set down my equipment bag and moved quietly toward the kitchen, not trying to eavesdrop, but not exactly announcing my presence either. I miss you, she was saying, her voice soft and intimate in a way I hadn't heard directed at me in months. When will we see each other again? I froze halfway to the refrigerator. As soon as he leaves for work, I'll text you, she continued. He's got an early inspection tomorrow. Should be gone by 7:15. He, not Mike, not my husband. Just he, like I was some obstacle to be navigated around. I stood there in my own kitchen, listening to my wife plan her day around my absence, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger yet. Something worse. Clarity. I grabbed a beer and retreated to the bedroom before she came back inside. When she slipped under the covers 20 minutes later, smelling like night air and secrets, I pretended to be asleep. How was work? She whispered, testing. I kept my breathing steady and didn't answer. The next morning, I made a show of leaving at 7:10, kissing her goodbye and complaining about an early inspection at a warehouse across town. She smiled and wished me luck, already reaching for her phone before I'd even closed the door. Instead of driving to the warehouse, I parked 3 blocks away and walked back. The coffee shop across from our building had a perfect view of the entrance, and I settled in with a newspaper and a large coffee to wait. At 7:35, Julian Mercer's silver BMW pulled into the visitor parking. He sat in the car for a few minutes, checking his phone, then got out and walked into my building like he owned the place. I watched him disappear through the glass doors and felt that cold clarity spread through my chest like ice water. My wife was cheating on me in my own home, with my schedule as her roadmap. I finished my coffee and drove to the warehouse inspection, going through the motions while my mind worked through the implications. 23 years of marriage, a mortgage, joint bank accounts, a life built on the assumption that we were partners. That night, Eliza was bright and chatty over dinner, asking about my day with the kind of performative interest that made my teeth ache. She'd done laundry, she said, cleaned the apartment, had lunch with her friend Harper. Oh, and Julian called, she added casually, not meeting my eyes. His divorce is getting complicated, and I told him he should probably find a therapist instead of venting to me all the time. The lie came so easily, I almost admired it. Almost. That's probably smart, I agreed. Divorce guys can get pretty needy. She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Exactly. I mean, I want to be supportive, but I'm not his therapist. I nodded and took another bite of the pasta she'd made, penne arrabbiata, which happened to be Julian's favorite dish from the Italian place downtown. She'd never made it for me in 23 years of marriage. After dinner, I excused myself to the home office and opened my laptop. If Eliza thought she could use my schedule against me, she was about to learn that fire inspectors are very good at investigations. I started with Julian Mercer. Social media profiles, LinkedIn, public records. The man was an open book if you knew where to look. still married, despite what Eliza had told me about the divorce. Living in a house in Riverside Heights with his wife Amanda and their 2 kids. No separation filings in the county court records, so either Julian was lying to Eliza about the divorce, or Eliza was lying to me about Julian's situation. Either way, someone was getting played. I bookmarked everything I'd found and closed the laptop. Tomorrow, I'd start gathering real evidence. Tonight, I'd lie next to my cheating wife and plan my next move. But first, I had a phone call to make. "Nate's bar," my best friend answered on the second ring. "It's Mike. You got a minute?" "Always. What's going on?" Nathan Torres had been my friend since high school, back when we thought we'd both become cops. He'd ended up a paramedic instead, then bought a dive bar when his back gave out. The kind of place where the beer was cold, the music was loud, and nobody asked questions they didn't want answered. "I need some advice," I said. "About surveillance equipment." There was a pause. "What kind of surveillance?" "The kind that documents what happens in a man's home when he's not there." Another pause, longer this time. "Jesus, Mike, you sure you want to go down this road?" I looked toward the bedroom where Eliza was getting ready for bed, humming the same song I'd heard her humming for weeks, a song that had never been on our playlists. "I'm already on this road, Nate. I just need to see where it leads." The nanny cam arrived 2 days later, disguised as a digital clock for the living room bookshelf. Professional grade, motion activated, with a companion app that would send alerts to my phone. I installed it while Eliza was at her Tuesday yoga class, positioning it with a clear view of the living room and kitchen. For security, I'd tell her if she asked. There have been break-ins in the building. She didn't ask. Wednesday morning, I made my usual show of leaving for work, complete with complaints about a difficult inspection at a strip mall across town. I even called her from the parking lot to say I'd be later than expected, some issue with the electrical systems that would take most of the day. The first motion alert came at 8:15 a.m. I was sitting in my truck outside the strip mall, coffee growing cold in my hand, when my phone buzzed. The app opened to show Julian Mercer letting himself into my apartment with what was obviously a spare key. He moved through the space like he belonged there, hanging his jacket on my coat rack, kicking off his shoes by the door. The second alert came 5 minutes later. Eliza emerging from the bedroom in a silk robe I'd never seen before. She walked straight into Julian's arms, and they kissed like teenagers, not the polite peck of old friends, the desperate, hungry kiss of lovers who'd been apart too long. I sat in my truck and watched my wife cheat on me in high definition. They moved to the couch, my couch, where I watched football on Sundays and fell asleep during late-night movies. Julian pulled her onto his lap, hands tangling in her hair while she laughed and whispered things I couldn't hear but could imagine. The camera caught everything. The way she looked at him, bright and alive in a way I hadn't seen in years. The way he touched her, possessive and familiar. The way they moved together like a choreographed dance they'd been practicing for months. After an hour, Eliza disappeared into the kitchen and returned with breakfast. Not cereal or toast. The full production. Scrambled eggs, bacon, fresh fruit, coffee in the good china we only used for holidays. She served it to him on the coffee table, curling up beside him while he ate. Julian Mercer was eating breakfast in my living room, served by my wife, while I sat in a parking lot watching it happen on my phone. They spent the morning like a married couple, reading sections of the newspaper to each other, sharing coffee, discussing plans for something called the cabin weekend. Julian showered in my bathroom while Eliza cleaned up breakfast. When he emerged, he was wearing my bathrobe, my fucking bathrobe. By noon, they were dressed and heading for the door, Julian pocketing the spare key like it was the most natural thing in the world. The last thing the camera caught was Eliza straightening the couch cushions, erasing the evidence of their morning together. I drove to the actual strip mall and spent the afternoon doing a real inspection, going through the motions while my mind processed what I'd seen. This wasn't a recent development. The spare key, the comfortable routine, the way they moved around each other. This had been going on for months. That evening, Eliza greeted me with a smile and a kiss on the cheek, asking about my day with the same performative interest as always. "Long day," I said, studying her face for any sign of guilt or nervousness. There was nothing. She was either a sociopath or a much better actress than I'd given her credit for. "I had lunch with Harper," she said, moving to the kitchen to start dinner. "She's thinking about listing her condo. I told her I'd put together some market comparisons." Another lie. Harper lived across town. Even if they'd met for lunch, Eliza had been in our apartment with Julian until noon. "That's nice," I said. "What did you have?" "What?" "For lunch, with Harper." A brief pause, barely perceptible. "Oh, just salads at that place downtown. You know, girl talk and rabbit food." I nodded and opened a beer, filing away another piece of evidence. Over dinner, spaghetti carbonara, another dish that had never appeared on our table until recently, I made casual conversation while studying my wife like a crime scene. 23 years of marriage, and I was just now seeing her clearly. The way she deflected questions with questions of her own, the way she volunteered unnecessary details to make her lies more convincing, the way she'd trained me to accept her version of events without question. After dinner, she excused herself for a phone call. "Julian," she explained with an apologetic smile. "He's having a crisis about the custody arrangements." She took the call on the balcony, as always, but this time I was ready. I'd positioned myself in the bedroom with the window cracked, close enough to hear her side of the conversation. "I know, baby," she was saying, her voice soft and intimate. "I wish you could stay longer, too, but we have to be careful. Maybe this weekend, when he goes to visit his mother." I wasn't planning to visit my mother this weekend, but apparently I was now. "I love you, too," she continued. "Sweet dreams." "I love you, too." I sat on the edge of our bed, listening to my wife tell another man she loved him, and felt something shift inside my chest. The cold clarity was warming up, transforming into something more focused, more dangerous. Eliza came back inside, bright and chatty again. "Julian's having such a hard time," she said, settling beside me on the couch. "His wife is being vindictive about everything, using the kids as weapons." "That's rough," I said, not looking away from the television. "Divorce brings out the worst in people." "Exactly. I keep telling him to take the high road, but it's hard when someone's trying to destroy your life out of spite." The irony was so thick, I could have cut it with a knife. The next morning, I made another show of leaving early, this time for an inspection at a restaurant downtown. The motion alert started at 8:20 a.m. Same routine, same comfortable intimacy, same casual use of my home as their private love nest. But this time, I was ready for more than just watching. I'd done my research. Our lease agreement was very specific about unauthorized occupants. Anyone staying more than 14 days in a calendar month was required to be added to the lease and submit to a background check. Anyone using the apartment without the primary tenant's knowledge was considered a trespasser. Julian Mercer was about to become a legal problem for my wife. I spent the afternoon at City Hall, pulling records and making copies. Julian's marriage license, property records, employment history. The man was still very much married, still living with his wife, still presenting himself as a devoted father on social media, which meant Eliza wasn't helping a friend through a divorce. She was helping a married man cheat on his wife. That evening, I called my mother and arranged a weekend visit. "I'll drive up Saturday morning," I told Eliza over dinner. "Probably stay through Sunday." Her face lit up with carefully controlled excitement. "That's sweet of you. Your mom will love the surprise visit." "Yeah, she's been asking me to come up and help with some repairs around the house." "Take your time," Eliza said, already reaching for her phone. "I'll probably just have a quiet weekend, maybe catch up on some reading." Sure she would. Saturday morning, I loaded an overnight bag into my truck and made a production of leaving for the 3-hour drive to my mother's house. Instead, I drove to Nate's bar and settled in to watch the show. Julian's car appeared in our parking lot at 9:15. He carried an overnight bag this time, apparently planning to make full use of my absence. I watched through the camera feed as he let himself in with what must have been a key Eliza had given him. The casual way he moved through my apartment, opening my fridge, sitting on my couch, it made my blood boil. Eliza arrived home from the gym at 10:30, all smiles and easy affection. They kissed in the hallway like newlyweds, his hands tangling in her hair while she laughed against his mouth. Then they disappeared into the bedroom. I took screenshots of everything. Time-stamped, dated, undeniable. But the evidence gathering was just phase 1. Phase 2 required a phone call. I'd spent Thursday evening tracking down contact information for Julian's wife, Rebecca Mercer. LinkedIn, Facebook, public records. The internet made it surprisingly easy to find people who didn't know they needed to hide. Rebecca worked as a pediatric nurse at the Children's Hospital, had 2 kids in elementary school, and based on her social media, believed she had a stable, happy marriage. Her most recent Facebook post showed Julian at their daughter's soccer game, captioned, "Best dad ever." I felt a twinge of guilt about what I was about to do to her world, but she deserved to know the truth, just like I had. I called her work number at 11 a.m. when I knew Julian would be thoroughly occupied. Rebecca Mercer. "Mrs. Mercer, my name is David Chen. You don't know me, but I have information about your husband that I think you need to hear." There was a pause. "Is this some kind of prank?" "I wish it was. Your husband has been having an affair with my wife for at least 3 months. Right now, he's at my apartment with her while I'm supposedly out of town. This isn't funny. I'm not joking. I have video footage, photographs, text messages. Your husband has been lying to both of us." Her breathing changed, became sharper. "Julian is at a work conference in Phoenix this weekend. He's at 2847 Riverside Drive, apartment 3B, my apartment with my wife." "You're lying. I can send you proof. Photos from today, from this week, from the past month. I can send you screenshots of their text messages. I can send you everything." Another pause, longer this time. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because someone needed to tell me, and no one did. I had to find out by accident. I figured you deserved better than that." "Send me the proof," she said quietly. "My personal email, rebeccamercer.rngmail.com. I'll send it right now. I'm sorry, Mrs. Mercer." "Are you, or are you just angry?" "Both," I admitted. "Definitely both." I heard her take a shaky breath. "How long have you known?" "About a week. I've been gathering evidence before confronting them." "Smart." Her voice hardened. "Send me everything you have. And Mr. Chen, thank you for calling, even though I hate you a little bit right now for being the one to tell me. I understand that feeling." I spent the next 20 minutes organizing files and sending them to Rebecca's email. Photos, videos, screenshots, timeline documentation, everything I'd collected over the past week, neatly categorized and dated. My phone rang 15 minutes later. "Rebecca." "I'm looking at photos of my husband kissing your wife in your kitchen," she said flatly. "He told me he was presenting at a medical sales conference." "Medical sales?" "That's what Julian does. Pharmaceutical sales. He travels constantly, or so I thought." "How often does he travel?" 2 or 3 times a month. Usually just overnight, sometimes for a weekend." She laughed bitterly. "I thought he was working so hard for us. For the kids. I'm sorry." "Stop apologizing. You didn't do this." Her voice shook. "He did this. They both did." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to drive to your apartment and see it for myself. I need to look him in the eye when I call him a liar." My heart rate picked up. "When?" "Right now. I'm getting in my car." This was escalating faster than I'd planned, but I couldn't exactly tell her not to confront her cheating husband. "Do you want me to meet you there?" "Yes," she said immediately. "I want them both to see what they've done." I paid my tab at Nate's and headed for home. The motion alert started at 9 a.m. and continued all day. Julian arrived with his own overnight bag, like he was moving in for the weekend. They cooked breakfast together, lounged on the couch, took a shower together in my bathroom. By afternoon, they were drinking wine and slow dancing to music I could see but not hear. "Jesus Christ, Mike," Nate said, looking over my shoulder at the phone screen. "This is hard to watch." "It's about to get harder," I said, taking another sip of beer. "For them." Sunday afternoon, I drove home as scheduled, timing my arrival for maximum impact. According to the camera feed, Julian was in the shower while Eliza made coffee in the kitchen. Perfect. I let myself into the apartment quietly, set down my bag, and walked into the kitchen where my wife was humming and preparing coffee for 2. "Hey, babe," I said casually. "I'm home." Eliza spun around, her face cycling through surprise, confusion, and naked panic in the space of a heartbeat. "Mike, you're early. I thought—" "Yeah, Mom was feeling better, so I decided to head back." I gestured at the 2 coffee cups. "Expecting someone?" Before she could answer, Julian's voice carried from the bathroom. "Eliza, honey, do you have any more of that expensive shampoo?" The silence that followed was deafening. Julian Mercer emerged from my bathroom wearing my bathrobe and an expression of absolute horror. Water dripped from his hair onto my hardwood floors as he stood frozen in the doorway, finally understanding that his perfect little arrangement had just imploded. "Mike," he said, like my name was a foreign word he'd never learned to pronounce properly. We weren't." "You weren't what, Julian?" I asked, pulling out my phone and opening the camera app. "You weren't fucking my wife in my apartment while wearing my bathrobe? Because that's exactly what it looks like." Eliza stepped between us, her face pale but determined. "Mike, let me explain." "Oh, you're going to explain, all right. Both of you are." I held up the phone, making sure they could see I was recording. "But first, Julian, why don't you get dressed? Unless you want your wife Amanda to see you like this when I send her this video." Julian's face went white. "You don't understand the situation." "I understand it perfectly. You're married. You live with your wife and kids in Riverside Heights. And you've been using my home as your personal fuck pad while I'm at work." I turned the camera toward Eliza. "And you've been helping him do it." Julian scrambled back toward the bathroom, muttering about getting dressed, while Eliza stood in the kitchen trying to regain her composure. "Mike, please, just let me explain what's really happening here." What's really happening, I said, still recording, is that you've been lying to me for months. Julian isn't getting divorced. He isn't separated. He's a married man who's been cheating on his wife with you, and you've been cheating on me with him. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. I walked to the living room closet and pulled out Julian's overnight bag, the one I'd watched him pack and unpack a dozen times on the hidden camera. How long has he been keeping clothes here, Eliza? How long have you been playing house with another woman's husband? She stared at the bag like it was evidence of a murder. Which, in a way, it was. The murder of our marriage. Julian reappeared, fully dressed and trying to project an authority he clearly didn't feel. Mike, I know this looks bad, but if you'll just listen, get out. I turned the camera back to him. Get out of my apartment, get in your car, and drive home to your wife. And if I ever see you in this building again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. You can't just... I can, and I will. This is my home. You're not on the lease. You're not authorized to be here, and you're sure as hell not welcome. Julian looked to Eliza for support, but she was staring at the floor, finally understanding that her carefully constructed double life was collapsing in real time. Eliza, he said softly. Just go, Julian. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Please, just go. He gathered his overnight bag and what remained of his dignity, pausing at the door for one last look at the woman who'd just cost him everything. Then he was gone, leaving behind only the scent of my expensive shampoo and the wreckage of 2 marriages. I stopped recording and looked at my wife, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in years. 23 years, Eliza. 23 years of marriage, and this is what it was worth to you. Mike, please, if you'll just listen to me, I can make you understand. Understand what? That you've been fucking another man in our bed? That you've been lying to my face every single day? That you gave him a key to our home and treated me like an obstacle to be managed? She flinched at the raw anger in my voice, but I was just getting started. I heard you on the phone, Eliza. As soon as he leaves for work, I'll text you. Like I'm some kind of inconvenience in my own life. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? Were you planning to divorce me eventually, or were you just going to keep both of us on the hook indefinitely? She didn't answer, which was an answer in itself. I walked to the kitchen counter where she'd left her purse and pulled out her phone. She started to protest, but I held up my hand. Password, I said. Mike, you can't just... I can, and I will. Either you give me the password or I drive straight to Amanda Mercer's house and show her the video of her husband in my bathrobe. Your choice. Her shoulders sagged in defeat. It's your birthday, 0817. My birthday. She'd used my birthday as her password while cheating on me with another man. The irony was almost artistic. I opened her text messages and found months of correspondence with Julian. Detailed planning of their encounters, intimate messages that made my stomach turn, discussions of weekend getaways and future plans that included phrases like, when we can finally be together. Jesus Christ, Eliza, you were planning to leave me for him. It's complicated. It's not complicated at all. You fell in love with a married man and decided to blow up 2 marriages to be with him. I scrolled through more messages, each one a fresh knife twist. Look at this. I can't wait until we don't have to sneak around anymore. When exactly were you planning to tell me? She was crying now, but I felt no sympathy, only a cold, calculating anger that was already working through the practical implications of what came next. Here's what's going to happen, I said, setting down her phone. You're going to pack a bag and leave, tonight. I don't care where you go. Hotel, friend's house, Julian's place if he's stupid enough to take you in. But you're not sleeping in this apartment tonight. Mike, this is my home too. No, it's not. The lease is in my name. The security deposit came from my account, and you just forfeited any claim to marital consideration by committing adultery with documented evidence. She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You can't just throw me out. I can, and I am. You've got 1 hour to pack whatever you need for the next few days. After that, we'll work out a more permanent arrangement through lawyers. What about us? What about our marriage? I looked at her standing in our kitchen, mascara running down her cheeks, still wearing the silk robe she'd put on for another man, and felt nothing but contempt. Our marriage ended the day you gave Julian Mercer a key to our home. Everything since then has just been paperwork. She packed 2 suitcases and left without another word, taking her secrets and her lies and her expensive perfume with her. I watched from the window as she loaded her car, Julian nowhere to be seen. Apparently, when the fantasy collapsed, he'd decided to retreat to his real life and leave her to deal with the consequences alone. After she was gone, I poured myself 3 fingers of the good whiskey, the bottle Julian had been drinking from, and sat down to plan my next move. Because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Eliza and Julian had spent months treating me like a fool, using my home and my schedule to conduct their affair. They'd lied to me, manipulated me, and made me complicit in the destruction of Julian's marriage without my knowledge. They thought they were so clever, so careful, so much smarter than the blue-collar fire inspector who was too stupid to see what was happening in his own home. They were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. I opened my laptop and began typing. Email addresses, phone numbers, social media profiles. Amanda Mercer deserved to know what her husband had been doing. Eliza's boss at the real estate agency deserved to know what kind of person they'd hired. Their friends and family deserved to know who they really were. But first, I had one more phone call to make. Nate's bar. It's Mike. I need that advice we talked about. What kind of advice? The kind that makes sure two cheating pieces of shit get exactly what they deserve. There was a pause, then a low chuckle. Come on over, brother. Let's talk strategy. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Amanda Mercer's house in Riverside Heights. It was one of those suburban developments where every lawn was perfect and every mailbox matched, the kind of place where people like Julian could pretend they were living the American dream. Amanda answered the door in yoga clothes, coffee mug in hand, looking like a woman who had no idea her world was about to explode. Can I help you? She asked, politely curious. Mrs. Mercer? My name is Mike Harlan. I think we need to talk about your husband. Her expression shifted from curiosity to concern. Is Julian all right? Has something happened? Something's been happening for months, I said gently. May I come in? She led me to a living room that looked like a magazine spread, all neutral colors and carefully arranged family photos. Pictures of Julian with his wife and kids at various stages of their lives. Beach vacations, Christmas mornings, school graduations, a life built on the assumption of fidelity and trust. Mrs. Mercer, I'm going to show you something that's going to be very difficult to see, I said, pulling out my phone. But I think you have a right to know. I started with the video from Sunday morning, Julian letting himself into my apartment with his own key, Eliza greeting him in her silk robe, the intimate kiss that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Amanda's coffee mug slipped from her fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. That's our apartment, she whispered. He said he was going to play golf with clients. He's been using my home as a meeting place for months, I said, showing her more footage. My wife gave him a key. They've been planning their encounters around my work schedule. She watched in horrified silence as her husband of 15 years kissed another woman, wore another man's bathrobe, ate breakfast prepared by his lover in another man's kitchen. I'm sorry, I said when the video ended. I know this is devastating, but I thought you deserved to know the truth. Amanda sat in stunned silence for several minutes, staring at the shattered remains of her coffee mug. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady and cold. How long? Based on what I've documented. At least 3 months, probably longer. 3 months? She looked around her perfect living room, seeing it with new eyes. 3 months of him coming home to me and the kids, pretending to be a devoted husband and father. I have text messages too, if you want to see them. Planning messages, intimate conversations, discussions about future plans. She nodded, and I showed her Eliza's phone records. Messages about the cabin weekend and when we can finally be together and I love you too, baby. He told me he was working late, Amanda said, reading over the timestamps. Client emergencies, weekend consultations. I was actually proud of him for being so dedicated to his career. Mrs. Mercer, I want you to know that I had no idea Julian was married when this started. My wife told me he was divorced, going through custody issues. I would never have allowed this to happen in my home if I'd known the truth. She looked at me with something like gratitude. Thank you for telling me. I know this couldn't have been easy. There's something else, I said. I've been documenting everything for the past week. If you're planning to file for divorce, this evidence could be very helpful in custody and asset distribution discussions. Amanda's expression hardened. Oh, I'm definitely filing for divorce. And Julian is going to discover that his loving, trusting wife has been paying attention to a lot more than he realized. I left Amanda Mercer with copies of all the evidence and a promise to testify if needed. As I drove away from her perfect suburban house, I felt a grim satisfaction. Julian's comfortable double life was about to become very uncomfortable, but I wasn't done. My next stop was Morrison Real Estate, where Eliza had worked before starting her own agency. The owner, Patricia Morrison, was a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s who'd built her business on reputation and referrals. Mike Harlan, she said, greeting me in her office. I haven't seen you since Eliza left to start her own business. How are things? That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about, Patricia. I think you should know what kind of person Eliza really is. I showed her the same evidence I'd shown Amanda, the videos, the text messages, the documented pattern of adultery and deception. She's been using adultery as a business strategy, I explained. Julian Mercer is married with kids, but she convinced him to leave his wife by promising a future together. Now she's helping him hide assets and plan his exit strategy. Patricia's expression grew colder with each piece of evidence. This is appalling, Mike. The real estate community is built on trust and integrity. If word gets out that Eliza is involved in helping clients hide assets during divorce proceedings, it would be bad for business, I agreed. It would be catastrophic. I'll be making some phone calls this afternoon. The real estate board needs to know about this, and so do her current clients. I left Patricia's office knowing that Eliza's professional reputation was about to take a devastating hit. In a business built on referrals and trust, being known as the agent who helped married men cheat on their wives was a career-ending designation. But I still wasn't done. That evening, I met Nate at his bar to plan the final phase of my revenge. The place was nearly empty, just a few regulars nursing beers and watching sports highlights on the television above the bar. "So what's the end game here, Mike?" Nate asked, pouring me a whiskey. "You've blown up Julian's marriage and destroyed Eliza's career. What's left?" "Public humiliation," I said. "I want everyone who knows them to see exactly who they really are." "What did you have in mind?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the social media profiles I'd been studying. Julian's Facebook page was full of family photos and inspirational quotes about integrity and hard work. Eliza's Instagram was a carefully curated collection of real estate success stories and lifestyle shots. "They've both built their public images on being trustworthy, successful people," I said. "I want to show the world who they really are underneath all that." Nate grinned. "I like where this is going." We spent the next hour crafting a social media strategy that would expose Julian and Eliza's affair to their friends, family, and professional contacts. Not through crude accusations or angry rants, but through carefully presented evidence that would speak for itself. The posts went live at midnight, timed to appear across multiple platforms simultaneously. Julian's Facebook friends woke up to see video footage of him kissing another man's wife in another man's apartment. Eliza's Instagram followers found themselves watching her serve breakfast to a married man while his wife and children slept at home. The comments started within minutes. Shock, disgust, disappointment from friends and family who trusted them. Professional contacts distancing themselves. Julian's coworkers expressing concern about his judgment and integrity. By morning, both of their phones were probably ringing nonstop, but I saved the best for last. Harper Blackwood, Eliza's best friend and biggest supporter, had been posting sympathetic messages about Eliza's difficult divorce and praising her strength in leaving an unhappy marriage. Harper had always looked down on me, treating me like an embarrassment that her sophisticated friend had somehow gotten stuck with, so I sent Harper a private message with all the evidence, along with a simple note. "Thought you should know what kind of friend you've been supporting." Harper's response came within an hour. "Oh my God, Mike, I had no idea. Eliza told me you were having an affair and she was leaving you. I've been telling everyone what a bastard you were." The lies just kept coming, even after everything had been exposed. "She's been using you, Harper," I replied, "just like she used me. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Harper's answer came in the form of a public Facebook post that afternoon, apologizing to me and correcting the record about what had really happened to our marriage. She tagged dozens of mutual friends and family members, ensuring that Eliza's final lie would be publicly exposed. By the end of the week, Julian had moved out of his family home and was living in a hotel while his divorce attorney tried to salvage what was left of his assets and custody rights. Eliza had lost 3 major clients and was facing an ethics investigation from the state real estate board, but the story wasn't over yet. 2 weeks after the social media explosion, I was having dinner at Nate's bar when Julian Mercer walked in. He looked like hell, unshaven, wrinkled clothes, the desperate expression of a man whose carefully constructed life had collapsed around him. He spotted me immediately and walked over to my table, swaying slightly. He'd obviously been drinking before he arrived. "You destroyed my life," he said, loud enough for the other patrons to hear. "My wife, my kids, my career, everything's gone because of you." I looked up from my burger and fries, completely calm. "I didn't destroy anything, Julian. I just showed people who you really are." "You had no right." "I had every right. You were fucking my wife in my apartment, using my schedule to plan your affair, drinking my whiskey, and wearing my bathrobe. If anyone had a right to expose what was happening, it was me." Julian's face was flushed with alcohol and rage. "Amanda won't let me see my kids. She's going for full custody and alimony. My business partners are talking about dissolving the company. I've lost everything." You lost everything the day you decided to cheat on your wife, I said, taking another bite of my burger. I just made sure the consequences caught up with you. This isn't over, Julian said, leaning closer. You think you're so smart, but this isn't over. Actually, it is. I pulled out my phone and showed him the screen. I'm recording this conversation, Julian, so if you're planning to threaten me, you might want to think about how that's going to look to your divorce attorney. Julian stared at the phone, then at me, finally understanding that he was completely outmatched. His shoulders sagged and he stumbled backward. You're a vindictive bastard, he said. No, I replied. I'm a man who got tired of being played for a fool. Julian left without another word, and I finished my dinner in peace. The next morning, Eliza called me for the first time since she'd moved out. Mike, we need to talk. No, we don't. Everything we have to say to each other can go through our lawyers. Please, just 5 minutes. I need to explain. There's nothing to explain, Eliza. I know exactly what you did and why you did it. The only question now is how much it's going to cost you. There was a long pause. I know you're angry, but destroying Julian's life won't bring our marriage back. I'm not trying to bring our marriage back. Our marriage has been dead for months. I'm just making sure everyone knows who killed it. You're being cruel. I'm being honest. For the first time in our relationship, I'm being completely honest about what's really happening. What do you want, Mike? Money? The house? What's it going to take to end this? I want you to face the consequences of your choices. Both of you. You thought you were so clever, so careful, so much smarter than the stupid fire inspector who was too blind to see what was happening in his own home. Now you get to live with the results. I hung up and blocked her number. That afternoon, I got a call from Amanda Mercer. Mike, I wanted to thank you again for bringing me the evidence. My attorney says it's going to make a huge difference in the custody hearing. How are you holding up? Better than I expected, actually. Once the shock wore off, I realized I'd been unhappy for a long time without admitting it to myself. Julian's affair wasn't the cause of our problems. It was just the symptom. That's a healthy way to look at it. I also wanted you to know that Julian's business is folding. His partners decided they couldn't trust him anymore, and most of his clients have moved to other firms. He's going to be starting over from scratch. Good, I said, and meant it. There's something else. I found out he'd been having affairs before Eliza. She wasn't his first, just his most recent. I thought you should know. So Eliza hadn't even been special. She'd just been convenient. 6 months later, I was sitting in my apartment. My apartment, since Eliza had signed over her claim in the divorce settlement, when I got a text from an unknown number. This is Harper. I thought you should know. Eliza's moving back to her hometown. Her real estate license was suspended, and she can't find work here anymore. She wanted me to tell you she's sorry. I deleted the message without responding. Julian had declared bankruptcy and moved to another state, leaving behind his children and the wreckage of his former life. Eliza had lost her business, her reputation, and her future in the city where she'd built her career. They'd both gotten exactly what they deserved. That evening, I was cleaning out the last of Eliza's belongings when I found a letter she'd left behind. It was addressed to me, written in her careful handwriting. Mike, it began, I know you'll never forgive me, and I don't expect you to. I know I destroyed our marriage and hurt you in ways that can't be repaired. I want you to know that I never meant for it to happen this way. I never meant to fall in love with Julian, and I never meant to hurt you. I thought I could manage the situation, keep everyone happy, find a way to transition out of our marriage without causing pain. I was wrong about everything. I was selfish and cowardly and cruel, and I'm sorry. I know my apology doesn't mean anything now, but I needed to say it anyway. I hope someday you can find happiness with someone who deserves you, someone better than me. I read the letter twice, then threw it in the fireplace and watched it burn. Some apologies come too late to matter. A year later, I was having dinner with a woman named Sarah Chen, a paramedic I'd met during a joint emergency response. She was smart, funny, honest, and completely different from Eliza in every way that mattered. You seem happy, she said, smiling across the table at me. I am happy, I realized, and it was true. For the first time in years, I was exactly where I wanted to be, with someone who wanted to be there with me. No lies, no secrets, no hidden agendas. Just honesty, trust, and the possibility of something real. Eliza and Julian had taught me an important lesson. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. And when they try to make you complicit in their deception, make sure they face the consequences. I raised my glass to Sarah and smiled. Here's to new beginnings. To new beginnings, she agreed. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt like I was finally moving forward instead of just getting revenge. Some stories end with forgiveness and redemption. Others end with justice and consequences. This one ended with both.